Welcome to Picks with the Professor, the show where a real statistics professor and his friends give you sports betting tips. I'm your host, Professor Sides, and this college football episode is going to wrap up our season bets for the 2023 season. Gentlemen, welcome back. All of y'all's research, culminating in our final episode here. The small schools, and I've teased it to people that there are some hidden gems here in these little ones, so I hope y'all come through for me here. Each of you we have more picks in today's show, so smaller schools, but more picks. So a lot coming forward. Cousin Jared, you want to shed some light on that?
I feel like this is where we make our bread and butter, not only during the season, watching the games because we're weirdos and we'll watch any football that's on TV, but also because I think this is where the model comes in handy, trying to separate, kind of the cream of the crop in these small schools, trying to identify differences that we may not be able to see with the naked eye, especially with out-of-conference games early in the season, and some of these people playing competition that way outclasses them.
Jake, can you follow up on that? I feel like that was very well said.
Yeah, there's not much to add other than there's 180 plus teams. There's no human that can keep all those separated without a model of some sort. So that's where we really lean on sideline.
Yeah, I think it's like 120-ish. Cousin Jared, you would know more than I would, right?
I want to say it's up to 133, but who's counting?
There you go. Okay, probably you. You're always the one counting if it's college football. All right. Well, before we get to it, just those quick reminders. Please hit that like button if you're on YouTube yet. If you aren't yet, please consider subscribing or following. It is free. If you turn on notifications, you won't miss any of college basketball, MLB, college football content coming in the fall, and NFL content as well. So make sure you do that. Otherwise, we will get right to it here. Here's where we're at so far. Each of our contestants has wagered $700 of their $1,000. Have $300 left to spend today. Let's get it going. Cousin Jared, Memphis.
This is a joke, right? That we're starting with Memphis.
No, it's not. We are really starting with Memphis. And if you've been with us, especially the last 2 years, and there's not many. The first year, we were very young, but 2 years ago, we had a lot of fun with Memphis. And last year, it just carried over, and we had more fun with Memphis. Cousin Jared, I feel like you were done with Memphis both the last two seasons about midway through the year. I guess this makes you not done with them for the whole year because you will have to continue to deal with them the whole time.
I asked myself, do I want to go through with this and have to invest myself in caring about Memphis for the whole season? And I think I just decided this may be like less painful than playing them week to week.
There you go.
Maybe I can just like somehow shut it out of my mind because it was gruesome at times. Some of the ways that we could win or lose totals related to
it was like it didn't even matter. It was like you go over and it was like the dumbest under ever. You went under, it was the dumbest over ever. It just did not matter. You could not.
You couldn't do anything right, for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put $50 on the Memphis under 7.5 wins at plus 125. Can't believe that I'm getting plus 125 there. If you told me this was about even odds or, plus 110, plus 115, I'd say, okay, but plus 125, I'm kind of surprised at those odds. And the reason that I say that is me personally, I look at those first 5 games and they are playing Missouri and they are playing Boise State. I think that is 2 losses for them right there. I think they're going to lose to Missouri, and I think they're going to lose to Boise State, even though they have that game at home. I think that's a game that they lose. And so I'm looking for 3 more losses on the schedule. They have to play Tulane, who is arguably the best team in the American. And then they also have to play at SMU, who I may also think is one of the best teams.
Versus SMU.
Yeah, versus SMU. So I think that's 2 more losses there. So I'm up to 4 losses. Are you telling me after what I've watched from Memphis the past few seasons that they're not going to lose one of these other games?
They're going to blow one somewhere in a weird fashion. It'll be like in double overtime off of a tip pass.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And I think that, they only had, I can't remember, 5 or 6 wins last season. I don't think they may have gotten to 7 wins last year. They didn't get to 8 wins. This would have gone under the number last year. And I think that people are thinking that, okay, Memphis has been consistent the past decade or so. Mm-hmm. We lost the top of the American going over to the Big 12. And so that is a chance for Memphis to step up. But I think that's just based on Memphis's reputation and not actually watching Memphis play football for the past 2 years, because it has not been the same team that they have been before. And again, they kind of get bad end of the draw. Really, there's 3 top teams in the American: UTSA, SMU, and Tulane, and Memphis has to play 2 of the 3. So I think the plus odds here is great. I don't know if I take this if it were normal odds like -110 or something, but I think getting into plus odds territory makes this a play for me. And just everything I've seen from Memphis the past 2 years makes me think they're going to find some way to blow a game in a crazy fashion that's going to limit them to 6 or 7 wins.
Jake, do you ever wonder, listening to Cousin Jared when he does research like this, like why we're even here? Just like let him talk the whole time, because I just feel like I'm just like, yeah, it's great. I love what you're saying,
Yeah, it's really hard to find something to add in. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, you covered everything I talked about, and now he's got more.
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what to add now. Without spend, I don't want to spend like an hour here on the first team because we got a lot to cover. But I do think with the small schools, there's going to be a lot to talk about with some of these teams. More variance on the small teams up and down because the fact that they gain and lose more in the transfer portal the bigger schools, Colorado, aside, right?
Yeah.
Boise State, we talked about that one, right? We already covered the Mountain West, but Boise State, we're expecting them to be solid again. I feel like they've been a little more up and down the last couple of seasons than they were the previous decade. Are we expecting a better Boise State team than, or at least a more consistent one? Anyone would chime in on that one?
I think you might be getting a desperate Boise State here because, if we want to do this live, you want to click open Boise State's schedule there. The start, open a new tab. Boise State's schedule is tough at the beginning of the season. And I think you might be getting a desperate Boise State team that might already have 2 or 3 losses at that point. And so I think that's also more of like a situational play because they could easily lose to Washington and UCF right there at the beginning of the season. And, for Boise State, not really acceptable to have too many more losses than that.
That's a good point. And at San Diego State, we talked about San Diego State maybe not being what they were, 7 years ago or whatever, when they were, 3 years ago when they were consistently better. But on the road, that's a scary game as well. So, it could easily be 2-2, maybe even accidentally 1-3. There, the other thing I was going to ask about, and you kind of touched on it a little bit already, and we'll kind of loop back around to this, but the American, the new look American, are we expecting it to be as good as the Sun Belt? The Sun Belt was a lot of fun last year, or do we think it's going to drop off a lot? I mean, we've lost all the top teams, but we still got some decent teams left. Where do we think the American will fall in the tier of caring about the conference and wanting to watch them?
I think it'll be fun, but just not as fun from having a really good top. You've got like 2.5 good teams at the top, and then who knows underneath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, took the words out of my mouth. I think the very top of the American is better than the Sun Belt, but I think like teams 3 to 10, the Sun Belt has the American beat.
Yeah. Well, that'll take us right into our next pick here, Jake. You're on the UTSA over 7.5 wins. One of the teams that we're talking about, we expect to excel in the new look American. UTSA coming over from Conference USA at some point. Is that right? Am I correct? Okay. Yeah. This is our first year. First season in AC. Yep. So they were at the top of Conference USA, made the conference championship game the last 2 years. I don't remember before that. I don't think they did before that, but the last 2 years, a really good team now jumping into a conference. You got some tough games on this schedule, Jake. So I'm guessing you're counting on them to really dominate this conference because at Tennessee and at Houston both feel like not, at Tennessee's count that up as a loss, right? At Houston, really tough game to open up the season. They'll definitely be underdogs in that one as well, but you're still going over 7.5 and laying a little bit of a juice. I'm guessing that means you think they're going to do really well otherwise. Is that correct?
Yeah, because you don't go rich betting against Frank Harris and that when he's going. He's back there. I mean, if he can stay healthy, this team's going to be loaded because their defense is good. And I mean, if they get Houston, because they were close, if I remember correctly, they were really close to getting Houston last year.
The game might have gone to overtime.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Houston's not the same. I think Houston is worse than they were last year. So, I mean, this time it's on the road, but you get 3 wins out of those first 4 games. We're looking really, really good. If they only come away with 1, I'm very scared. So counting on the
I mean, they
wins,
should get Texas State and Army both at home. I feel like that you should win those.
Yeah, well, it's just weird things happen when you play the service school sometimes.
It's true. It's true.
But I mean, the rest of their schedule works out fairly good for them. I mean, you see, you get your you really don't leave home after October, really that until you see Tulane, because North Texas they absolutely walloped them the last time they played. Florida Atlantic is a good team, but I mean, if I was going to pick my road games for this conference, it would be Temple, Florida Atlantic, and North Texas. I don't want to go to East Carolina or South Florida, any of those places. I want to stay where this is at. I think their schedule breaks for them. 8 wins. It's going to be tough. I don't see 5 losses on the schedule. Maybe if they screw up in the first 4 games, but I just think they're too loaded on defense. They're very good offense. They've got a really, really good coach, and I think it'll be cruising when we get to October to 8.
And I have to clarify. I actually just looked back at my last year's end of season ratings, and I would have actually had this opening game, UTSA at Houston, at about a pickle in that ballpark. So I was surprising me. My mind just goes back to UTSA good, but good for Conference USA, and Houston's a good team. But yeah, Houston was very disappointing last year. They are, and we didn't talk about them, but they to me are much, at least in the Big 12 preview, but they're going to be a huge question mark because they were so disappointing last year. Stepping up and weight class will be tough for them. Because I'm going to put you on the spot here. UTSA, I feel like last year their defense really surprised us both. That the previous season it was all offense, and this last season it was like they actually slowed some teams down, made a few teams play a little bit differently, played a little bit better defense. I was just expecting fireworks every game, and they didn't have to do that all the time. It was a little surprising. I'm curious if you think that they're going to be able to improve off of that, and how much of that was real, how that's going to affect them stepping up in class. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that I think I would probably expect something more similar to last season than 2 years ago, just because I think, Jeff Chaler's had more time to implement his system. He's not a guy who just wants to run up the scoreboard. He wants to play a solid defense. Yes, Frank Harris is back for approximately his 17th season, but also they lost their best wide receiver who, at a school like UTSA, losing a receiver like that is a big deal. And I can't remember off the top of my head where he transferred to, but he was, an all-conference type player. And so I think that the offense, will still be solid, but I think you're going to see something more like last year than what you did 2 years ago.
Yeah. Wrapping up the AAC here, we have not yet done a wager to win a conference. Back in the day when you didn't have conference championship games, or when, you had the Big 12 that, had the 10 teams didn't play one, your wager to win the conference was mapping through the schedule, who could have tiebreakers, all sorts of fun stuff like that. Now everybody's got a conference championship game. Doesn't matter how many teams you got, because all the conferences might actually have 12 this year. I can't, all the shuffling, I'm not even 100% sure, but either way, they've all got conference championship games. There's a real risk in betting to win a conference championship. That's why we haven't done one yet, because it's not an overly smart bet all the time, because you are betting on what happens in the season and then another game. You can just wait till that game and bet that game when it comes. The reasons to pick a conference champion winner this early in the season would be because you think that the probability is just way off. And you say, I'm going to have massive plus odds on a game that I think they can get there. And if so, they're 50-50 or something like that. And the odds are going to be much more in my favor. Jared, you think you found that situation here in SMU to win the American. Of course, part of this is they're going to have to win that game, or you're going to have to play out of it, which we can cover down the road when we get to December. But why do you think that plus 275 is worth money today just for them to be one of the top 2 teams in the American?
Well, when I look at the conference schedule, I think clearly the top, why don't I even say top 2? Let's say top 3 teams, I think, are Tulane, SMU, and UTSA. And if you look at that schedule, you'll notice an absence of either of the other top 2 teams in the conference. And so I think SMU by far has the easiest path to getting to the conference championship game. I also think that Tulane, if I had to pick right now, I think I would pick Tulane straight up just to win a game if SMU and Tulane played right now. But I think that Tulane is getting a lot of hype based on that Cotton Bowl win over USC in January. I think they're getting
which was a lot of fun, by the way.
It was a ton of fun. I mean, that's the whole reason that we love college football. But I think that we're just holding on to that just a little bit too much. And I think SMU's a tad underrated. I think Tulane's a tad overrated. And so kind of when you combine those together, I think the most likely thing we get at the end of the season is a Tulane-SMU matchup, but I don't think you're going to be able to get SMU plus 275 at that point. Yeah, I think they're going to be like maybe plus 180, plus 200. I think it's going to be maybe a 4-point game, something like that is what the line would be at that point. So I just think there's value here. I think they have the easiest path to getting to the conference championship game, and I feel good about it. I think it's going to be a close game regardless of who they match up with in the conference championship game.
And, of course, I think it's interesting here. At OU, probably a loss. At TCU, I mean, probably a loss. Don't have to care, right? So that's definitely the interesting alternative to the conference title bet is, if you look at that and you say, I don't really want to take their season win over bet because I need them to pull an upset somewhere to make me feel really good about it. Now you don't have to worry about that because we're eliminating Oklahoma and TCU. Jake, any last words here on the American before we shift to your conference bet?
No, I think he picked a really good spot. Not seeing the top two other teams means you go in feeling better than they do because that last game of the regular season is Tulane at UTSA. So having that is brilliant because they beat each other up that game, and you've got Navy, but that could just be weird. It doesn't have to be that overly physical and overly. I don't really have an idea how good Navy is this year. So I think
probably not very, unfortunately.
Yeah, so I think SMU's if they're in range, they're going to be coasting there and feeling really good going into that championship game.
And you definitely have the possibility of, in that last week, needing one or the other between UTSA and Tulane to win or lose. And that can make that really fun, too, going to that last week. Being like, hey, we need, having that extra rooting interest. That could be fun there. Jake, you have a conference winner as well, shifting conferences here. You're going to take South Alabama to win the Sun Belt. Sun Belt Fun Belt was a lot of fun last year, really living up to that name. You're at plus 250 on this wager. Same thing, at Oklahoma State, probably a loss. At Tulane, probably a loss. Don't have to care because you are picking them to do well in the conference. Why do you like the plus 250?
One, because the win total was at 7.5 and heavily juiced. So I think, in my opinion, if they're going over, they're winning the conference because it's between them and Troy on the Sun Belt West. If they're still doing the divisions, I can't remember on that. But I think those are your top two teams over there. And I can't remember, was the Troy game that finished 10-6, was that the one that just absolutely monsooned and just killed South Alabama's offense? Because
Jared, that'd be you would have to remember that one.
Yeah, no, I can't remember who they were playing, but it was like 24-0 at halftime, and then nobody scored in the second half in the monsoon.
Yeah. Well, either way, it was 10-6 in the last time around with the Troy, and that really decided who got to go. I think everybody that's returning here for South Alabama, with 4 of your 5 starting on the line, you're bringing back Carter Bradley and Ladarius Webb. The offense is top notch when they're going because they can absolutely control the clock, suffocate you out of a game with the way Webb can run. Like you said, we don't really care about the first 4 games anymore. So who cares what happens at Tulane and Oklahoma State? And they can even drop one to Southeast Louisiana. And just don't matter. Their schedule is a little bit rough going through there. Like you got at Troy and Texas State can really show up at times at home, and James Madison's not easy. But I think, like I said, if they're going over 7.5, they're getting the 8th, 9th win. They're winning this conference because they'll be in the championship with something to play for. And they were so close last year. They bring so much back. I think this team is really, really good.
The monsoon game was Arkansas State. That was the next week. So it was right after that. But yeah, that 10-6 game could have easily gone either way. Didn't go their way. It looks like they are still doing divisions. So you are. That's the other thing too about betting the conferences. You got to do your homework on. If you're on the divisional plan, like some conferences still are, you're not quite as focused on the other side. If you're on the top two, which about half or so of the conferences are, it's a whole different world there too. So a lot of things happening here in the conference wagers. Because Jared, anything to discuss here with who wins the Sun Belt conference title?
No, nothing really. But I am going to take a very, very long, rambling approach on my thoughts about the Sun Belt. So we'll just move right into that.
All right, let's do it.
So
making your own segue, I like it.
Yeah, I can't believe that I've come to this point in my life, but is the Sun Belt my favorite G5 conference now over the Mountain West? And I'm afraid to say that it might be. The Sun Belt is just so
I could see it happening last
fun.
year. You were, we talked about it a lot last year. We had a lot of fun with it.
And you had a lot of different clashes of styles. You had some really low scoring games. You had high scoring games. You had monsoons. You had just about everything that you could possibly imagine. And I think the top of the Sun Belt is just wide open. I mean, App State, Coastal Carolina, which Jamie Chadwell's gone, but they still have Grayson McCall. I still think they're going to be pretty good. James Madison, of course, love what you saw from them last year. Georgia Southern, first year under Clay Helton, they played really well at times. Louisiana still doing pretty well. Marshall, really solid defensively. South Alabama, as y'all just talked about. Southern Miss, solid team. Troy, very good team. Texas State. Okay, Texas State hired G.J. Kinney. I promise they're going to beat somebody where they score like 61 points. Now, they may give up 56 points to the other team, and they may lose.
If he's anything of the coach like he was as a quarterback, right? And learning from his offenses at Tulsa, right? They will be a lot of fun to watch. Nothing else.
Yeah,
a far cry from the previous Texas State teams that were not really a lot of fun to watch.
Yes, exactly. So I think they're going to be fun and exciting. But where I'm going with this is that the Sun Belt is stacked. And that means that somebody's going to lose a lot of games. And I think I have identified two teams that are going to be at the bottom of the barrel here. And the first one is Old Dominion. And I'm going to put $75 on them to go under 3.5. I kind of left out on SMU. I'm betting them $50 at the plus 275 to win the conference. Old Dominion betting 75 here to go under 3.5 wins. Look at the schedule, and A&M Commerce, they're going to win that game.
Yeah, they're going to win that one.
After that, it gets tough. versus
Georgia State is their next most likely win, probably.
Yep. Maybe
at Georgia Southern, probably.
Yep. I mean, it's tough. It's really, really tough to find too many wins on this schedule. So we'll move on to the next team, which you just mentioned, is Georgia State, and I am actually going to put $75 on them to go under 5.5 wins. Really, really juiced odds here. Almost got scared off of the minus 165 here, but I think that this is just too good a value to pass up. If you can get this under like minus 150 or something like that, I love it even more. Another reason I was kind of slow on this, you look at those first three games, Rhode Island, UConn, and Charlotte, and you could say, okay, we could be—
those are winnable.
You could be looking at 3 wins there. But again, go through the rest of the schedule, and
there might not be another win.
There might not be another win for the whole season. You got that last game at Old Dominion the last week of the season, which is definitely going to be their best chance to win. Again, McCall is still at Coastal Carolina. I think they're going to have enough, Coastal Carolina being at home, to win that game. Troy, Marshall, Louisiana, Georgia Southern, maybe they could win that one. Best case scenario, they beat Georgia Southern and Old Dominion. You're still at 5 wins. I mean, they're not going to beat George Madison. They're not going to beat LSU. They're not going to beat Troy. So anyway, I just don't see how, any way you slice it, where they end up with 6 wins. And again, I think this is just a kind of a leftover of when, I don't know, probably 5 years or so ago, Georgia State was hovering around that 6-win number each year. And I felt like they just hung it up. It's like, hey, is Georgia State going to get to a bowl game? But when you look at the schedule, there's no reason to think that they're going to make a bowl game. The Sun Belt is much better than it was those few years ago. So Sun Belt's going to be great this season, but somebody has to lose. And I think it's going to be these teams. Bonus points, the site that we were using did not have a win total on Louisiana Monroe, because if they did, I think it might be set like 1.5. So if you really want to have like a perverse joy, go find the season win total for Louisiana Monroe. That'll be entertaining, whatever line you find.
That has sickos written all over it, betting
Yes.
under 1.5 for Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah.
I forgot to make the joke, of course. You can make it either way here, right? LSU has something to look out for there on November 18th. Or the Jake, you made the comment about they could even blow one to Southeast Louisiana or whatever. And it's like, I just have to point out, if you've got a team to win a conference championship and they blow one to Southeast Louisiana, you are worried officially. It doesn't really hurt you, but it hurts you either way, right?
It hurts your heart.
Yeah, it does make you a little bit worried. But yeah, we're getting to some of these teams now playing FCS schools. Here is Rhode Island. So you're going to get some freebie wins, but some of the other schedules here, or some of the other games beyond that, are a lot tougher. I think I like the Old Dominion one a little bit better because of the odds, but because of Jared, you're right, both of those are very enticing. It just seems really difficult to find those wins. The caveat and the question mark is there's extra variability. Are there more transfers, recruiting stuff that it wouldn't take as much to bring in some talent and then all of a sudden jump a whole level than it would at a bigger school, right? If you're talking about a team like Texas Tech, who's not going to be a bad team, but for Tech to make that leap into 10 wins, it's going to take more than just one or two guys. But at these smaller schools, one or two guys make a bigger. That's the only question mark. That's how you lose one of these bets. I feel like if that doesn't happen, and we don't think it is, then I think both of these are easy winners. And that's part of gambling, right? There's always some uncertainty, and I think. The point being, I think the uncertainty here is just more about, did they accidentally get somebody we didn't realize? Because if they didn't, it's going to be tough sledding ahead for a couple of these schools in the Sun Belt with really tough schedules. Jake, anything to add before we get to your Sun Belt, your other Sun Belt pick?
Yeah. Old Dominion is bad. I'm sorry if there's Old Dominion fans out there, but they're 3.5 is generous. I expected that to be lower. Honestly, and then Georgia State, I'm not too sure what to make of them, but I don't see them getting a bowl game. So I feel like those are two pretty safe picks.
Yeah, it's the schedule is really tough. If the schedule broke easier, you say they got a good chance to get to 6, and they or maybe if they just weren't playing LSU, they'd have a better chance to get there. But having that guaranteed loss, I will just say Old Dominion at Virginia Tech. That's their Super Bowl, right? That's the whole season.
They won that last year, didn't they?
Yeah. They did. And part of my thinking is that can't happen 2 years in a row, right? I mean,
probably not.
Yeah.
That seems unlikely. But I mean, that would be their Super Bowl because they have to know making a bowl game is really unlikely. In-state rival, little like not even little brother, like a littlest brother, right? That sort of thing. Especially now that James Madison has leaped them like crazy, right? For a while, I don't know how many years ago now, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, pick the right number. Old Dominion was this upstart team that was gonna maybe be the fun team in Virginia, and all of a sudden that just switched to James Madison like in a heartbeat. It seems like it completely changed. With James Madison's ascension. Speaking of, Jake, that is your pick here, James Madison. A team we love, a team that's really good, but you think this win total is a little bit high. You're going under 8 wins at even money. They get in-state rival Virginia. Have to go to Utah State. That's going to be a tough game based off of travel for sure. Otherwise, it should be a competitive game in that Utah State, probably going to be a little bit better than last year, and then the rest of the conference slate with a UConn home game thrown in. Under 8, Jake, take it away.
Well, before Jake talks, I want you to look up and tell me what the line would have been in the last season for James Madison at Virginia. Sorry, Jake, I had to butt in because I think that's going to be an interesting line.
What do you think? Well, if you butt in, what do you think it would have been?
I don't know. I think it would have been about a pick 'em. Maybe James Madison by.
I think James Madison would have been favored.
All right, go for it, Jake. And I'll look it up, and I'll.
Well, first off, I want to take this moment to boo the NCAA for not letting them go on.
Fact.
That's just foolishness. They're jumping up in competition. What's happening here? I mean, their defense was incredible. 8th in the nation, finished 2nd in run defense to Georgia. I don't like this team was stacked, ready to go. I think they had a lot of extra motivation, jumping up with something to prove. I don't think that so much exists anymore. And so there's a little bit less motivation. They've got a really good offensive line, but they're having to replace their leading rusher from last year. They've got two quarterbacks who couldn't break in at – one couldn't break in at Arizona and the other one couldn't break in at Wake Forest. Wake Forest, whatever. But the Arizona guy he seems like he's going to win the battle, so that doesn't tell me the talent is quite there. Mm-hmm. Our defense is still going to be really, really good. I think that's very much a system that really makes defenses do well, like outperform talent. But the schedule could be a bear because those 3 road games we were talking about at the beginning of the year, that's tough. You go at Virginia, at Troy, at Utah State, and then you come home to South Alabama. That is a absolutely bear of a stretch.
It feels like one of those things where it's set up. If it breaks right, they can win all 3 of those games. If it breaks wrong, they could lose all 3 of those games. And who knows, right?
They could very easily be 1-3 going into South Alabama, or 2-2, or it'd be terrible for me if they're 4-0. But I mean, then you also get at Marshall, and Marshall is a good team that really can just punish you at home or on the road. They just take the ball away like crazy. You get a gimme and 2 gimmies there back to back with Old Dominion and Georgia State, or 3 actually in UConn. So that makes it a little scary, but I just don't see them going to Coastal Carolina, Appalachian State, winning both those at the same time of beating and going. I don't see them taking 2 or 3 of Virginia and Troy and Utah State. I think that is a very tough stretch, a lot of travel, bouncing back and forth across the country, it feels like, and I just don't see them doing that. It's going to be hard to find that 9th win on the schedule.
Did I say that Virginia would be favored? I don't think I said. I just said like in-state rivalry. I didn't make it.
No, you did not.
I just said
it. No.
Okay. What was y'all's predictions again? I need a number prediction on this, Cousin Jared.
I would probably say James Madison by like 1.
Jake,
I was thinking 3.5. James Madison
8
at Virginia.
At Virginia, I had James Madison as 11 points better.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, they were good last year. Virginia just completely fell off a cliff. I don't know. Again, I haven't built this year, so I don't know. We'll cross that bridge come the show for September 9th, right after Labor Day. We will discuss that. Maybe, I guess. We might talk about the game. We'll see. I'm curious, and I want a 1 number answer. I'm gonna put both of y'all on the spot here. Jake, I'm gonna start with you since this is your pick, and then Cousin Jared, I'll ask you 1 number on a scale of 1 to 10. How much value do you think there is in going James Madison's under? Simply because of the fact that they were so fun last year, everybody was rooting for them, and they're like America's underdog almost, and that can create some value on a scale of 1 to 10. How much value do you think is added because everybody wants to root for this team?
Like 3. Like
3.
I think. I mean, the books are going to balance the books, but like they're not going to take a huge loss somewhere. But they're also not going to throw a stupid line where sharps are going to just load up on it.
Yeah, because Jared,
maybe a little higher than that, maybe 5 or 6. I think that the people that actually move the lines know that this conference is stacked, and James Madison could just as easily have just as good a team and win 6 games just because App State or Coastal playing better, or I don't know, Utah State bounces back, something like that. So maybe a little bit, but not.
I mean, they would have been at 7 if it wasn't for a miracle comeback against Appalachian State.
Yeah, and I just think it's something interesting to think about. A lot of these season bets have lower limits, and so there's a lot of these. I know I've heard a lot of complaints that the big money sharps have mostly shied away from season bets, that they felt like they can't really make a lot of money up, so they haven't messed with them. And so as more sharps get out of the season win market, it allows people like us who are coming in and betting $10, $25, $50, $100, whatever, more reasonable amount of bets, to actually have a little bit more influence in the market, because the people who are coming in and trying to get down 5-10 grand or whatever have stayed out because the limits are lower. The way they open them up really early and then adjust the limits and everything. So more sharps being out, relatively speaking, creates just a little bit of a different market than we saw a few years ago. I don't know if that necessarily says anything or helps anything. I just think it's interesting to think about. We're going to shift over to the MAC now, and of course, Jake, last year you were the MAC daddy, and so I feel like you've got a reputation to uphold, and you have to show off your MAC skills with your 2 MAC picks. And of course, we will be looking forward to your MAC analysis all season long. Ohio over 7. It's got some juice. You do have a gimme win, of course, against Long Island. We already talked about San Diego State in the previous show. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. But that Ohio-San Diego State game should be really fun and close game. That could make or break both of the season win totals for those teams, given how that game goes. Home against Iowa State, that is going to be a sneaky fun game, I feel like. In Ames, I don't think they have much of a chance, but home against Iowa State, that could be a really fun contest. The MAC, I feel like the MAC has been a little bit less fun in recent years. It hasn't been quite so chaotic. It's been a couple of good teams and then a bunch of bad teams as opposed to a bunch of solid teams. My hunch is that somewhat leads you to this over simply because you're thinking if the MAC overall isn't as strong, you got a bunch of those 3-win teams down there that Ohio can beat up on them and get some easy wins. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think at worst of those first 3, they're taking 2 of the 3, whether it's San Diego State and LIU or Florida Atlantic and LIU.
Or maybe they lose to LIU and win the 2 road games. I mean,
yeah. I mean, who knows?
The fighting Tom Hermans, the fighting Tom Herman Owls of Florida Atlantic.
Yeah. I thought at first you were saying he was at Long Island. I was like, what?
I was like, whoa.
An insane fall from grace. Okay, yes. No. So, yeah. Is Florida Atlantic, hold on, sidebar here. Is Florida Atlantic the place that you go when you're okay, yeah, I get because you know where I'm going with this. Fairfield coach.
Willie Taggart. Yeah. Lane Kiffin, Tom Herman.
Yeah.
Rehabbing coaches everywhere. But yeah, so you're bringing back Rourke, which makes everything better. Even if he's not back at first, I still think CJ Harris isn't that much of a downgrade. Was what this team at the beginning of the year.
And if I remember correctly, he did not participate in the spring game, but he was out there moving around enough that you have to think he's good to go for week 0, because if he was that far away, I don't think he would have been out there. So I think he's going to be back for the whole season, which, as you said, is a huge thing. He was by far the best skill position player in the MAC last year. Just what he did for that team last year was incredible.
He just makes football fun to watch. And then he's got his best receiver coming back in Sam W, because I'm not going to try to pronounce that. And then they've got 2 running backs that are incredible. Like one guy, Allison, missed all of last year, and his guy behind him did just as well. So now you've got 2 guys who are relatively at the same level and are mega talented behind a very good line. And like everybody wants to look at the first part of the season and look at that defense, but if that last 8 games, I think they flipped a switch, turned a corner. They didn't let in more than 390 yards, and that feels weird saying, but if you look at the beginning of the year, that was a big improvement. Walter Reynolds improves an already very good secondary. They're going to get a lot more turnovers this year from that. Get a little bit of a pass rush that's really going to help that secondary out. Look, they've only got the 1 Power 5 school, so there's not that give me loss, and that one's not really even a give me loss. Like at home, what's Iowa State doing traveling to Ohio? But that's very, I think, on the winnable side of things.
Yeah, that's not a gimme. That's if you're an Iowa State fan, you have to look at your schedule and be like, don't overlook that road game, or else bad things will happen.
Yeah, and the MAC is very. It's got top 2, maybe 2.5 teams, and the rest gets rough. Ohio benefits from getting both Akron and Kent State, which that's 2 more wins out there. They get Miami of Ohio, who's that half a team that might be up there at home. At Buffalo could be tricky, and maybe at Northern Illinois, but I don't think it's going to be hard for them to get to the 8-9 wins, maybe even 10 this year.
Looking at last year's rankings, I would have had Iowa State about a touchdown favorite there on the road. I mean, it's not a gimme, right? I mean, Iowa State should definitely be favored in that game, but we see touchdown favorites lose all the time. I mean, any given Saturday, we'll see 5 or 6 of them easily about that number lose. So, I mean, it's definitely a game they could blow. Jake, you're on the over 7 in Ohio. Of course, Cousin Jared, I would be remiss if I did not ask you what your thoughts are on October 28th when they play Miami of Ohio, a team that we just hammered their unders last season. Kind of let us down at the very end of the season, but we made a lot of money on those unders. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up and ask you about Miami of Ohio.
Yeah. I was going to say that. I feel like that's the only thing that I feel good about in the MAC is Miami, Ohio unders. But I think we kind of talked about it earlier that some of these they're not group of 5 anymore. I don't know what they want to be called now, but what used to be the artist formerly known as the group of 5. Well, it's complicated. They don't really say they want to be called the group of 5 anymore. So, I don't know what the lexicon we're going to be because will the group of 5 really matter when we go to the 12-team playoff? Anyway, we talked about with the smaller conferences, like transfers can make a big difference. Who you have coming in, who you have going out can kind of, make it go down or go up. The MAC, in my opinion, is the most, I don't even know what the right word is. You could say like upwardly mobile, but also like just think can crash and burn very quickly. I think this conference just oscillates every single year, and there's just no way to know. So I'm glad that Jake is carrying the banner for us here and talking about the MAC, because there are very few things that I feel confident about with the MAC.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a good MAC player, it feels like a Big Ten school is right there, literally right there, ready to poach you and say, why don't you come play for us? Which, like you said, can make them a lot worse when they lose good players. But yeah, you could get the other way. You could get a guy, a guy from Ohio State who, doesn't play as much as he's wanting to, feels like he's never going to play, drops down to a place like, now, of course, maybe it obviously depends. And you might, I don't want to get into semantics, right? Maybe he goes to whatever, but there's a lot of those guys like in the Big Ten that could drop down into the MAC and all of a sudden make those teams really good. So you said a lot of mobility upward and downward. Jake, you are carrying the torch for us. You also have Toledo over 9.5 at plus 130. You're getting the plus odds there because a MAC team winning 10 games in the regular season without the benefit of the conference championship game is, I don't know, something that hasn't been done since approximately 1947. But Toledo is a team that at times last year looked like a team that could win 10 games at times last year. Looked absolutely clueless. I'm thinking specifically of that road game at San Diego State. But they definitely have the talent that a lot of the MAC schools don't have. Obviously, at Illinois, going to be a very tough game. They will be massive underdogs, and not quite as big underdogs as they were against Ohio State, but they should still be really big underdogs. Texas Southern's a gimme win. Thankfully, they get San Jose State at home simply because that's a really tough travel spot, as they found out last year going to San Diego State, and then it's the conference slate. Jake, why do you think they can get to 10 wins?
First off, I'm making this bet with full faith that Finn stays healthy, because if he goes down, it's very scary. But he has a very good line. Got his top receivers back. He has a very, very good running back. The defense has an incredible secondary, which I think will help them get past Ohio because they're still in the same division. They've got a few transfers in that can really help out. On the defensive side of things, they're extremely experienced, very, very good coaching staff, because they return almost everybody. And I'm not so sure the Illinois game is going to be as big of a spread as it appears it would be. I think this Toledo team can be very nasty at times, but you've got. So even if we count the Illinois' loss, I think Texas Southern, San Jose State, Western Michigan, UMass. I mean, Northern Illinois at home, that's probably a win. Ball State's not very good. After Illinois, it's going to be at Miami of Ohio before you run into a team that should give them fits. So I mean, that could be the second loss there, and they don't play Ohio. That's big. Ended on Central Michigan and Bowling Green and Eastern Michigan. I think they cakewalk through the end after Miami of Ohio. So there's just the only two losses I see out there are the Illinois and maybe Miami, Ohio.
Illinois, if you use last year's rosters at the end of the season, would have been would have been about a 21-point favorite in that game. So there'd be massive underdogs in that one. But like you said, you can count that as a loss, and it's no big deal. And I'm going to make a bold prediction here. Toledo will lose a road game. I don't know which one, but they are going to lose a road game where they look absolutely clueless. I've seen this Toledo team do it too many times. I've seen it happen in the MAC too many times. There's always these random games where you're like, how did they lose that, right? I feel like Toledo will do one of those. The benefit for you is Toledo's good enough that if they take care of business and the other games, which they should, there's no other gimme losses like Illinois, even blowing that one road game, they still go 10-2. So you still got a good chance to hit it if that happens. I think my biggest question marks on this one is some of those middle games, right? Ball State, are they going to be improved? I think they've got some upward potential. Miami of Ohio, like we already talked about, they've got some potential. That defense plays well if they get any offense. Buffalo, at times, looked pretty decent last year.
Freaking Buffalo.
Yeah, at times they looked pretty decent. At times they look clueless. I mean, you could tell me that October 31st there, that's a Halloween night game, and
I didn't realize that.
It could get spooky. I'm telling you, that game, you could convince me Toledo wins that game by 35 or they lose by 17. I'd be like, sure, like Buffalo's involved, who the heck knows, right? So there's that chunk in the middle there that they got to really escape through, but they definitely have a chance. They could go 11-1. I mean, like you said, it's not like there's any game that's really scary outside of that Illinois game. So you're going over Toledo, over Ohio as well. Those are your two MAC picks, which is going to take us to our final conference, Conference USA. UTEP under 5.5 wins at -105. Jacksonville State, they are making the jump up this year, I believe. Is that correct? They are playing, or are they still FCS? Are they making the jump up next year? Does anybody know?
I don't think they're there this year.
They're not there this year. They're just going to.
Yes.
Okay. So they still then, I think they're a good FCS team, but they still are an FCS team. Incarnate Word, that should be probably a gimme unless they just randomly do that thing that they did a couple years ago where they just like decided they were going to score 80 points a game, which was a lot of fun. I feel like UTEP's schedule like bounces around like crazy. You got some weaker teams to start to, and then you just get at Northwestern, at Arizona, which isn't the scariest thing for a Power 5 school, but for a school like UTEP, those are scarier games. And then it settles down into conference. You see Sam Houston there, another team that is moving up. Liberty, a team that now is finally in a conference. This schedule just confuses me because there's just so many teams that I'm like, I don't even know where you are anymore. But either way, we're going to go under 5.5 wins on this one. Let's hear why.
Like, schedule is really the biggest reason. It does them no favors because Jacksonville State, that's not an easy win on the road. It's an FCS team that's good.
They're good. Yeah, they're a good team.
But we learned from James Madison last year that doesn't mean that you're a crap school just because you're on that lower level. Incarnate Word.
No, they are up in Conference USA this year.
Okay,
so that's a conference game to open up in week 0.
That's tough because Jacksonville State's got that motivation of something to prove.
Also,
hosting that first game.
Also, bonus points. Who can name? Viewer, if you don't know this, pause and see if you can figure this out. While I put these guys at the spot here, who can name the head coach for Jacksonville State?
I have no.
Rich Rodriguez.
Nailed it. Cousin Jared coming through in the clutch. Rich Rodriguez in his second year. I feel like Jacksonville State, they could easily be, or Sam Houston jumping up to Conference USA. Both of those are really good FCS schools. Both of them could easily pull what James Madison did last year in a week conference, win 8 games and take the nation by storm,
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of one of the reasons because they're at Sam Houston too. Their schedule does them no favors. Northwestern and Arizona, that's 2 rough back-to-back road games. Then I mean New Mexico State, FIU, but Louisiana Tech's not easy. And then those last 4 games, right? At Sam Houston, Western Kentucky, at Middle Tennessee, and Liberty. That's taking the top of this conference and just struggling through it. That's not easy. That's not fun. It's going to be really hard for them to get to 6 games, especially Hardison is a decent quarterback, but man, he's so inconsistent and throws the ball to the wrong team way too many times. His top receiver is now at Texas A&M. The leading rusher is gone. Defense is probably still good, but they're depending on a lot of JUCO guys, and who knows how they glue together, especially early in the year, their system, new everything. I just think there's too much new not enough talent to get through to that bowl game win because this schedule is a monster because they just, I don't know, drew the short straw with having to go to the teams they have to go to, and then those last 4 games are just impossible to go through.
Yeah, Sam Houston is a team who notoriously, was seemingly every year playing North Dakota State in the FCS title game for several years in a row. A little bit of a down year for them last year. I think a lot of the FCS teams have had, some interesting up and downs lately. They had that weird thing where they played a full schedule after COVID when in the spring of 2021, and came back and played again in the fall of 2021. That kind of made things interesting. Last year, some of these teams, Jacksonville State, for instance, was told they couldn't play in anything because they were moving on up. And the Atlantic Sun just tried to screw them. But, Jacksonville State last year went 9-2. Their losses were to Tulsa, which on the road, which is nothing to be too ashamed of, and then Southeastern Louisiana, who lost and who made the playoffs. They beat a ranked team in Austin Peay. They beat a ranked team in SFA. So, I mean, Jacksonville State's a very solid team coming up. And, of course, Sam Houston, again, a little bit of a down year last year, but a solid team as well. So it's going to make for a very interesting Conference USA with a couple of these new teams coming up. And that's going to make it tough on UTEP. UTEP's a team, and Cousin Jared, I don't know if you have anything to expound on this, but my recollection really of UTEP is they kind of start off really hot in 2021, I believe it was, with a very weak schedule. But it was all smoke and mirrors when they started playing real teams. It kind of went downhill. And that's, I think your hope, if you can get to 6 wins, is that UTEP has actually gotten better. I'm not sure how much better they've gotten as much as it is, they're still going to struggle to get players to come out to El Paso. It's not really an attractive destination for kids to go play football.
Yep, that's basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah. We got one more conference winner. Cousin Jared, you've got Liberty to win Conference USA. Look, I know that Conference USA is trying to tell us to take the dash out, but I'm a dasher. I love the dash. I'm sad that they're trying, and I'm like rebelling against the dash. I'm not usually this type of rebellious person, but I mean, come on, Conference USA. The dash was cool. Long live the dash. Cousin Jared, plus 230 for Liberty to win the conference. Again, going to be an interesting conference. Liberty didn't even have a home last year. Their schedule was all wonky. Not as wonky as New Mexico State, who's playing in Conference USA. Conference USA feels like the place that it's 2 a.m., closing time, and nobody has a partner. So everybody was like, let's go to Conference USA. It's just a ragtag group of teams. You think Liberty can win this conference? Tell us more.
Yeah, and I don't think that Sam Houston's even eligible to win the conference based on them not having any odds. I assume they're in the same boat as James Madison was last year.
And Jacksonville State. Neither one of them can win.
Yeah. So anyway, it's very, very odd situation there. So I'm going to go with Liberty to win the conference at plus 230. Going to bet $50 on this. And I mean, in my opinion, really, it's Liberty and Western Kentucky at the top of this conference, right? I feel like that's not breaking any news there. And with the change from Hugh Freeze to Jamie Chadwell, I will admit that the ceiling for the team might be a tad bit lower with Chadwell than what it was with Hugh Freeze. But I also feel fairly confident in saying that the bottom is quite a bit higher than what it was at Hugh Freeze, because how many times did we see Liberty just not show up for a game and get completely shellacked? Now, they go out and they beat Arkansas. They win all these games that they shouldn't even be in, but then they would throw a couple of clunkers out there as well. I feel like Chadwell is going to make this team more consistent, maybe than what
I have that. If that's not Hugh Freeze to a T, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's the man in a nutshell. So I guess what we're saying is, hey, watch out, Alabama, on whatever the Saturday after Thanksgiving, because I mean, who knows what Auburn's going to throw out there then?
Throwing not even throwing the kitchen sink, throwing the whole dang kitchen at them, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, this just kind of goes back to, I think it's them in Western Kentucky. I would be shocked if it's not the two of those teams playing for a conference in the conference championship game, because if it's not one of them, you're looking at teams like Middle Tennessee or Louisiana Tech, which, I mean, we all love Sonny Cumbie, but do we think that La Tech's going to be able to get to the conference championship game? I don't think so. So this just seems
Middle
to me
Tennessee
like,
beat Miami last year.
well, yeah, they did, but then they didn't do much the rest of the season, and Miami turned out to be absolutely awful at times. So anyway, I think that this is just really good value. You know, I talked kind of about like a little bit. I think there's going to be good value if SMU got to the conference championship game. I'm not even really worried about value here. I mean, I think Liberty is the best team in the conference, and I think Chadwell's going to have them ready to play. So this is just, I think there's good value because I think they're the team that's going to win.
It'll definitely be a different mindset from last year without having a conference. Like you said,
Yeah.
being able to kind of focus when they wanted to and not when they wanted to. And it didn't matter. None of it mattered. It was like, whose line is it anyway? You know, who cared? They just did whatever they wanted to do. And we took advantage of that betting. And we almost just kind of got to the point where we were saying, screw the model, just bet them when they're playing a good team and fade them when they're not. You know, take the points and lay the points in those situations or whatever. We were basically just taking the points in any Liberty game. I guess it was when they were an underdog, it was take the points, and when they were favored, it was take the points against them. It'll be different this year because they, you know, non-conference games aside, they're going to have a bunch of conference games here where they are, you know, playing for something. New coach will change that a little bit as well. Middle Tennessee, I would have to imagine, would be the third most likely team. Louisiana Tech, who went 2-6 in the conference last year, it doesn't really inspire the confidence to do it. I will have to point out that going back to UTEP, in Data Dimmel's time there, their Conference USA record is 8-28. So that doesn't really bode well for the talent that comes out to UTEP. Jake, any parting words here on Conference USA or Liberty?
Oh, I feel like you're right. Liberty was like, crap, we didn't make it into any of the good conferences. We're just going to go here, dominate for a year or two, and move on.
It does seem like they would be a great addition to the Sun Belt. I would love to see Liberty, James Madison play. Love to see Liberty and App State play. I feel like they'd fit right into the Sun Belt. You know, who's done a masterful job of overtaking Conference USA 5 years ago. You would have said 5, 7, whatever years ago. You would have said Conference USA was prime, or maybe 10 years ago, you would say Conference USA was primed to be the best non-power conference, and then the American overtook them, and then now the Sun Belt's overtaken them, and Conference USA has suddenly just dropped to the bottom. That doesn't mean there's not money to be made there, though, and that's why we're here. So Liberty plus 230 on Conference USA, Cousin Jared's final bet. All of your bets on this episode were $50, and so I will bring up the screen. Here is our recap, and again, we will track this throughout the season. Keep tabs on it. We'll figure out stakes. Otherwise, gentlemen, any parting words for the last time you get to really talk about college football until August, whatever, 24th? I don't know. Pick a day for our first college football show.
Can't wait to give my Week 0 Nebraska preview.
It's become an annual tradition, unlike any other. So I don't know if they play this year in Week 0. So we may have to make a special segment for that if they're not playing.
Don't care. Still going to talk about it.
Still going to do it. I mean, what else would you talk in Week 0? What else you talk about, right?
That's true. Besides San Diego State and Ohio,
which I'm definitely looking for.
The Ireland game is something to watch this year. I think Notre Dame's over there playing somebody.
I don't even know. I do know that I glanced at the Week 0 schedule, and there's a lot of large spreads already. But again, we'll break it down when it gets here and see what ways we think we can make money. Maybe pick a few money line picks, take a few points, talk a few totals. We the triumphant return of Cousin Totals, giving us mostly underplays because that's how he lives and dies. And folks, just as a reminder, if you're still with us, whenever Cousin Jared tells you taking over, run. Don't walk to the window because that's not his jam. All right. Well, that's all we've got then. Do remember to check out the baseball shows. We're still rolling in the middle of baseball season. But otherwise, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Picks with the Professor. And don't forget to subscribe so you can enjoy all the sports betting content we provide on this channel. Jump right into your feed. Until we see you again, as always, best of luck. And remember, you can eat your betting money, but please don't bet your eating money.